In this video, I am going to discuss Immanuel Kant's moral philosophy. In this segment, I am going to cover the distinction between hypothetical imperative and categorical imperative. Imperative is command. Command in Kant's moral philosophy, it is command of reason. In our previous videos, we have discussed that human being has a special faculty called reason. The function of reason in human life is different from the function of inclination, impulses, etc. So, rest of the creatures act on the basic principle, that is seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. This is what is called instinct. So, human being also to some extent act in accordance with impulse or instinct or the inclination, but on account of the existence of the faculty called reason, human being the behavior of human being is somewhat different from other creatures, and the purpose that reason serves in human life is something different from other faculties. So what does reason serve? What purpose reason serve in human life? It gives us a command, or it creates imperative. It makes law and creates an imperative to obey that law so that we can rule over our passion, inclination, etc. So its duty of reason in human life is to produce a will that is good in itself, not good as means to something else like happiness, etc. Actually, it is a function of inclination, etc. to seek pleasure or happiness and avoid pain. But reason has something different purpose. Otherwise, why reason should be there in human life? It must have some teleology. Teleology means goal or purpose. So this is the standpoint of Immanuel Kant concerning reason. Now why I am talking about reason over here? Because it has a very deep connection with imperative and the distinction between two types of imperatives. So imperative is command. Whose command? Command of reason. Whose reason? Reason as a faculty of human being. So now two types of imperatives are there: hypothetical imperative and categorical imperative. From the very nomenclature, hypothetical, you can understand that it is conditional. Conditional in the sense that a command or an imperative is ought to be done, ought to be executed if there is a certain condition. So if then, it is expressed in the form of if then. And actually, simply put, it means that an action is good for some purpose. We ought to do a certain action in order to fulfill a desire, in order to fulfill an end, as a means to fulfillment of a desire. An action is good as a means to something else, not good in itself. An action is good for some purpose. An action is good for fulfillment of an end. So here the activity is good only as a means. And the form of hypothetical imperative is expressed in Kant's groundwork of metaphysics of morals in this way. Listen carefully. Every rational agent, if they will a certain action, then ought to desire, I'm repeating it again. Every rational agent, if they will a certain end, they ought to will the action good as a means to that end. I'm repeating it again. For every rational being, every rational agent, since I'm talking about action, that's why agent, if every rational agent, if they will a certain end, then they ought to will an action good as a means to that end. Now I'm going to analyze this form of imperative so that you can understand very easily. So, for example, if you want to do well in your exam, you must work hard while preparing. So you must do hard work in your studies so that you will be able to do well in your exam. So doing well is an action, and in order to attain that goal, one must go through a very hard-working process called study or other like preparation, etc. So doing hard work is a command of reason. For what? For doing well in exam. So it is conditional. It is not, this action, doing hard work, is not good in itself. It is conditioned by an aim, and that aim is if you want to do well in your exam. Why it is ought? Because sometimes we know that if I want to do well in my exam, then I must do hard work. But due to our subjective limitations, our will is hindered by passion, desire, inclination, etc. Sometimes doesn't it happen like we want to study, we know that we ought to study, but we are feeling sleepy due to our like laziness. We want to do hang out with our friends, we want to watch TV, etc. These are all subjective limitations which are the hindrance to reason, and that is why like the imperative appears as ought, like it becomes an imperative. Okay, otherwise if our reason were not hindered by these subjective conditions, then it would be like in the form like every rational agent will. Here the concept of duty is coming because our reason is hindered by subjective limitations. So for every rational agent, if they will an aim, they ought to will a certain action good as a means to that aim. This is a principle. This is objectively valid for every rational agent. It is an objective principle. So imperative is imperative is an objective principle that necessitates will, obligates will to do a certain action in order to attain a goal, a particular goal, or in order to attain a particular goal, to fulfill a desire. So this is always conditional. On the other hand, what about categorical imperative? Since this imperative is qualified by the term categorical, it is unconditional. Categorical means devoid of any condition. So an action is good, while an imperative is categorical. It means an action is good in itself. One ought to do an action because the action is good in itself. There is no further reference to any condition. So the form of categorical imperative is every rational agent ought to do certain action because the action is good in itself. Every rational agent ought to do an action because the action is intrinsically good. There is no further reference to any condition, aim, desire, etc. So this is what is categorical imperative is. There is only one categorical imperative, and that is that goes as act only on that maxim through which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. So basically your maxim should be universal. A maxim of your action should be universalizable. This is what is called categorical imperative. For Kant has not given any example, but still if you want to think on the basis of example, so you may think like in any situation, if you were unable to decide between two courses of action, what you need to do, if you are not able to decide between various alternatives, so what you need to do, you need to think in such a way whichever action is universalizable under the similar condition. If there were similar condition, now your action, would it be universalizable? If others will be doing the same thing under the same condition, would that action be universalizable? Asking that question give you the answer. So universalizability is the foremost criteria for categorical imperative. And on the other hand, another important component is that your maxim, that means you are legislating law and obeying law. So act only on that maxim through which you will that it should become a universal law of your universal law. That is what is called the categorical imperative. Thank you.